Welcome, everyone, to our Packers News Chat virtually alongside Jim Owczarski. I am Olivia Reiner. Today, we'll be discussing the potential competition at a number of position groups across the Packers. We don't know exactly when the NFL is coming back. We don't know exactly when training camp will start. However, what we do know is that eventually the Packers will have to whittle down their 90-man roster to a 53-man roster. That will be our topic of conversation today. We'll talk about roughly 4 groups today, and then we'll come back to some of the other position groups at a later date for another live stream. But before we get to that, I want to remind you, you can be a part of our conversation. As always, head on over to Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are. Leave us a comment in the chat, whether it's a question, a general thought you're having, and we will address some of those toward the end of our conversation. Jim, why don't we start with perhaps the most important position on the roster, at least in Matt LaFleur's eyes, the quarterback. Why not, right? So Let's start at looking at the quarterbacks that are currently on the 90-man roster. Just to note, the draft picks are not technically signed yet. However, for the intents and purposes of our exercise today, let's just assume that they are. So last year, worth noting, the Packers only kept 2 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster. 2 of them made the team. That was Aaron Rodgers and Tim Boyle. Deshaun Kaiser got cut, so did Manny Wilkins. Wilkins ultimately made it onto the practice squad. The big question this year is what will happen to Tim Boyle, who was signed as an undrafted free agent back in 2018. He made the team in 2018 alongside Kaiser, and then he beat out Kaiser in 2019 for that backup role. He's only been active for, I believe, 3 games this past season with the Packers, and he's only thrown about 3 passes in a single game, that game against the San Francisco 49ers in the regular season. He will not be eligible for practice squad if the Packers even had any desire to keep him. They can't do that. He's had 2 accrued years in the NFL. So what happens to Tim Boyle if, with the presence of Jordan Love, the Packers' latest draft pick, their first overall pick in this year's draft? How likely is it that the Packers continue the trend from last year and only keep 2 quarterbacks on their 53-man roster?
Well, it's Brian Gutekunst, 2 years ago, as you said, kept 3. So it's to me a little hard to predict. I mean, if it's me making the call, they're keeping 3 again. Tim Boyle will be ready to play and potentially help the Packers get through a game or games if Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. Our colleague Tom Silverstein vehemently disagreed with me on that in our Green 19 podcast after the draft, Olivia. He said basically they could cut Tim Boyle today. That it has to be Jordan Love. Jordan Love has to be given all of the reps and the attention that a true backup could get. I think, Olivia, if this was a normal offseason, I could maybe roll with that. But as you said in the lead here, I mean, it's possible, likely, that he's not on a field with the Packers until late July. And to me, if this team is still thinking it can go to a Super Bowl, how does Jordan Love help you win week 1 if Rodgers gets hurt, or week 3 if Rodgers gets hurt, for a short window of time? If it was a season-ending injury, I think that's a decision the team can make down the line. But it's just, I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like if Rodgers pulls a hamstring in week 1 and can't play for 3 weeks, they're going 0-3 if it's Jordan Love. I just don't think he'd be in a position with no practice and no work with these guys to win a game. So to me, I think they need to keep 3. That's kind of where I sit right now.
In what world, how likely is it that Jordan Love could beat out Tim Boyle for that backup position?
Yeah, that's a great question. Jordan Love is going to have the ooh and ah moments when we do see him in camp. That's the one thing pretty much every NFL coach that evaluated him and his college coaches talked about. They're even going to he's even going to make Aaron Rodgers go, whoa, like this dude can sling it. So there's going to have that. I guess if you look at last year, Olivia, with Kaiser and Boyle, where it was a true competition in the eyes of the head coach and GM, I mean, Tim Boyle beat him out. It was pretty clear. Could Jordan Love do that? Sure. He's a first-round draft pick. Tim Boyle was an undrafted guy out of Eastern Kentucky. So, I mean, of course it's possible. I guess for me, I need to see it to believe it, at least for this year.
Sure. Tim Boyle has made it these past 2 seasons. We'll see if he's able to make it another season, this upcoming season in 2020. Let's move on to the running backs. Another pretty deep group here. Last season, the Packers kept 3 on the team in Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and Dexter Williams, their 2019 draft pick. Williams is an interesting character. He has only played 4 games. He had 5 carries for 11 yards last year. Matt LaFleur last year, when speaking about Dexter Williams, said that he does not believe in redshirt years, that every player needs to be willing and able to get in a game when they're asked to. Dexter Williams wasn't asked to play very much at all, and essentially, for all intents and purposes, he did have a redshirt year. So in addition to Dexter Williams coming back and vying for a spot, there's also Tyler Ervin, who was a big part of the Packers' return game. He came on and had 11 punt returns for 106 yards, averaging nearly 10 yards per return. He also got involved in the offense a little bit more toward the end of the season there as well. And of course, there's A.J. Dillon, the Packers' second-round pick this past draft. They have a lot to balance there in that running backs room when it comes to making a decision as to who they're going to keep, who will become a casualty in that group.
Well, to me, it's Dexter Williams. You know, I know Jamal Williams is kind of the sexy talk among amateur capologists and GMs on social media. He did get a performance-based raise along with Aaron Jones, $2 million. But look, I mean, Dexter Williams just never got it last year. I mean, he looked good when given the ball and, you know, was told, hey, put your foot in one cut and go. However, the Packers offense requires so much more from its running backs in protections, in, you know, pass catching, route running, all that stuff. And Dexter Williams just, you know, he couldn't catch in practice, which we saw. I don't know how that translates to the game. You know, we would see occasionally the head coach get on him, you know, in training camp. And look, A.J. Dillon was a second-round pick, so he's on the team. Tyler Ervin, to me, Olivia, is their starting kick returner. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, he became a real part of the offense in December, you know, leapfrogging Dexter Williams. So, to me, I think Dexter Williams is easily the odd man out. No offense to Demaria Crockett there either. You know, his attempt to make the 53, but I think it's Jones, Jamal Williams, A.J. Dillon, Tyler Ervin.
For running backs there, a little bit different from last year when there was only 3 on the 53-man roster. So, Jim, let's move on to the offensive line position. You're keeping a running back. Someone's going to have to go. What about the offensive line? Let's take a look at those names that are currently on the 90-man roster. That's a lot of names. There are a lot of offensive linemen. A lot of those names are coming from the 3 draft picks in 2020 in Jake Hansen, John Runyon, and Simon Stepanak. And on top of that, there are 3 returners that maybe hot seat is not the right word, but there is a level of uncertainty as to whether or not they will be returning. And that would be Lane Taylor, who spent most of 2019 on IR after he initially won the starting job, got injured week 2, and then Elton Jenkins took over at that guard position. He's entering the final year of his contract, and if the Packers decide to get rid of him, they would be saving around $4-ish million in cap if they decided to get rid of him. Then there's also Cole Madison, who isn't necessarily a veteran. He hasn't spent a lot of time actually playing for the Packers, spent 2018 on the reserve, did not report list, and then in 2019, he was placed on injured reserve toward the end of November. Alex Light has seen the field more often this past season. He actually played in 8 games. He was active for 13 of those games. He played 151 snaps. Jim, how likely is any of those three? How likely is it that any of the three of those players will make the roster this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think, to me, the only way Lane Taylor does make it to the start of the regular season, whenever that is if the team switches Billy Turner to right tackle. They signed Rick Wagner. Matt LaFleur would not anoint him as the starting right tackle. So I'm curious what that means going through camp. I'm guessing they wouldn't want to do that. They'd want to keep Billy Turner at right guard. Lane Taylor seems to me like in that Mike Daniels situation. Try to trade him before training camp starts. And if not, there's a casualty type of situation there. Lucas Patrick on the team. He signed an extension. So there's your kind of backup center / guard. After that, it's really interesting. I mean, you're talking about a cast of misfits, if you will, a lot of undrafted guys. I mean, Alex Slate has a lot of experience at this point. They do like him, but I don't know, Olivia. I mean, did he look great filling in for Brian Bulaga? If he did, would they have signed Rick Wagner? So we don't know anything about Yosh Nijman. I mean, he got hurt right away. We don't know anything about Cody Conway, John LeGlue. Now, you mentioned Cole Madison. I think he is kind of the guy that might be an odd man out. I mean, they overdrafted his position now with Runyon, Jake Hansen to a degree, Stepanek. There's a ton of interior linemen here. Hansen is a center, but Lucas Patrick was the backup center. So if Patrick isn't the backup center, then he's a backup guard. Yeah, it's really interesting. I could see them going short here, Olivia. Because you're right. I've got one extra quarterback now. I've got one extra running back. To me, offensive line has to kind of come down. So I see, John Runyon, I think fits because he could play multiple positions. He could play tackle. LeGlue, I think fits because he can play guard and tackle. Lucas Patrick plays a couple positions. So Hansen, Stepanek are I don't know if they're long shots, Olivia, but I could see Hansen being a practice squad guy, like they're trying to get him through where he's there and they can have him. But this will be interesting what they do, what those rotations mean. And I think, Olivia, these are the guys who are really hurting from not having this on-field work, because what were the plans for the coaches? What rotations were they going to put them in? Where were they going to be repping? We don't know. So that group is going to be really fascinating to watch once we can watch them.
A lot of competition at that group, a lot of questions that we have that may not get answered for a little while. And they're questions that some of the coaches are going to have as well, as long as they can't see these players out on the field. Certainly a position to keep an eye on. Let's move on to the next position group that I want to discuss today, in the inside linebackers. Why not? In 2019, the Packers kept 4 inside linebackers on the 53-man roster in Blake Martinez, Oren Burks, Ty Summers, and James Crawford. Crawford is no longer with the team. Blake Martinez is no longer with the team, leaving Burks and Summers. However, as we know, the Packers decided to sign inside linebacker Christian Kirksey in free agency to a 2-year deal. He is in the mix now, in addition to Kamal Martin, the Packers' 5th-round draft pick out of Minnesota. He'll make things interesting. Burks, I think, is someone to keep an eye on. The Packers selected him back in the 3rd round of the 2018 NFL draft. He played 122 defensive snaps in 2018. He played 254 special team snaps in 2018. And then in 2019, he only played 57 defensive snaps, played roughly the same number of special team snaps. His role certainly saw a decrease last season. Big question this season is who becomes a casualty in the inside linebackers room?
Yeah, this is kind of fascinating. I mean, Oren Burks, it's funny, people seem to be ready to write him off. I'd put him in the same category with Montrevious Adams. How important are these training camps for these guys? And will Brian Gutekunst, cut ties with relatively high draft picks if they're beaten out? I mean, what's interesting about this room, Olivia, is people are looking at it. I mean, Summers was a 7th-round pick, didn't play a single defensive snap. He made the team because he showed out during the preseason, made splash plays, was kind of impressive, and then was really solid on special teams. Bolton was, I think, in competition with Summers to make the team last year, and then he blows a knee in Winnipeg. So Chris Barnes, again, undrafted, I think you put him in that mix. Kamal Martin, look, Martin's a 5th-round draft pick. I don't think there's anything guaranteed there to me. So it's like Kirksey and then take that other group. Could they keep 4? Maybe. I could see him going 3, just the way I'm curious to see how Mike Pettin's going to build this, Olivia. Like, what's the role for Rashawn Gary? Like, is he playing more? If so, is he with the Smiths? If that's the case, then you don't really need all these inside linebackers to actually play. What's the, you know what I mean? So I feel like I have a handle on a lot of positions on what they may go, what they want to do. This one, I'm just kind of up in the air. I could see him having Kirksey, cutting Oren Burks and Ty Summers and Curtis Bolton, keeping Kamal Martin, and going with a bunch of safeties. I could see him keeping 4 again. I don't know what. It's just kind of, again, it goes back to how important training camp's going to be in preseason games, and for guys like this, they got to hope that they can get to the field sooner rather than later. This one I'm stuck on. So if the listeners, viewers out there have any ideas, by all means, tweet me. Let me know what you think, because it's, I could see 4 or 3, 2. I'm this one I'm at a loss for. You stumped me.
I'm happy to stump you. I'm glad that I could do that for you. And as you mentioned, it seems like that the number of inside linebackers that will be on the 53-man roster may have something to do with what Mike Pettin's plan is for this defense. Do they want to continue to use a hybrid safety in there alongside whoever their mainstay inside linebacker is going to be? Perhaps Rashawn Gary could be that another type of player that they would want playing at that level. Similarly, there's a lot of questions. We don't have those answers yet,
Right.
but they're good things to think about. Let's take some of our questions from our lovely viewers. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's go right to Todd here. Not a question, but a thought. He says, if they liked Dexter Williams, if the Packers like running back Dexter Williams, the Packers would not have drafted A.J. Dillon. What does A.J. Dillon's drafting this past draft, what does it project for Dexter Williams in the future?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I think Dexter Williams is the odd man out on the roster. I think it has less to do with a 1-for-1 in that instance, Olivia. I mean, look, Aaron Jones coming up on a contract year, so is Jamal Williams. They both for sure will not be back. You just don't pay running back second contracts. And look, the Packers are up against it. If Aaron Jones, as is right, is looking for legitimate starting money, I think the Packers will let him walk. So you need a guy, right, for 2021, and A.J. Dillon is under contract. So I think it's more of he'll help this year, of course, if those guys are healthy, and meaning Jones and Jamal Williams. But you know what you got the next 3 years, ideally. Dexter Williams, again, I think, he's got to be so much better than he was last year, Todd and Olivia. I think, and again, not having this time on the field is Dexter Williams is a guy that hurts.
Atomic Hound, as a follow-up question, asks, is Dexter Williams a practice squad candidate? He would be eligible for the practice squad. It's just a matter of, do the Packers think he is one of the 10 best players to revert to the practice squad if the Packers decide to cut him?
Yeah, and that's possible. I mean, they've had running backs on the practice squad the last few years. Williams, again, to remember, he was a 6th-round pick coming out. So, he was probably on draft boards around the league. And that's the thing. When you release a guy, he's got to clear waivers. So I could see Dexter Williams be a guy that gets claimed, to be honest. But I'm sure could he come back? That would make sense. You know what I mean? Like, he's a draft pick. He knows the system. If he had to get called up right away to play, he'd be able to do that, presumably. So yeah, if he's not claimed, for sure.
Possibly. Thank you for your questions, everyone. Let's move on to something that's entirely unrelated, which is okay. We appreciate unrelated questions as well. This one from Robin. Robin asks, what are the odds of bringing back former Packer defensive lineman Mike Daniels for a veteran minimum contract? How badly are the Packers in need of assistance along the defensive line this upcoming season, Jim?
Well, I thought they were in need, but Brian Gutekunst clearly didn't think so. He drafted a 7th-round edge rusher who doesn't really help the D-line. So, I mean, he must feel good about Montrevious Adams coming back and Kingsley Keke and Tyler Lancaster. So, no, I think I understand that Packers fans really like to bring old Packers back. But I think Brian Gutekunst is proving that once he gets rid of you, you are gone. Now watch, they may change my mind here if someone gets hurt, but look, they cut Mike Daniels for a reason. And right now they have 90 people on their roster, so they'd have to cut somebody. And I don't know that they're going to do that until it's late in the camp. And at that point, if guys start getting hurt, it's like Tramon Williams, Clay Matthews. If Kirksey gets hurt, or Oren Burks get hurt, or if Kenny Clark gets hurt, or and those guys are out there, then I think it becomes more realistic because they can kind of come in without as much practice, and fit, just being veterans and somewhat familiar with Mike Pettine's scheme. So, but as of now, Robin and Olivia, I just don't think. I think they've moved on from those guys, and for a reason.
The Packers also signed defensive lineman Trayvon Hester.
That's right, yeah.
In free agency.
They claimed the Dolphins guys too, yeah. So don't mean to spike those new guys whose names I don't know right now, but yeah, they did add a few more guys off waivers or free agency, yeah.
So there will be some new faces in that group, and we can revisit that group on a later live stream and have a more in-depth conversation about the Packers defensive line. So thank you, Robin, for that question. Let's go over to Andy. Less of a question, more of a statement once again. Andy says that he's very interested in the talk tomorrow with Rodgers. In case you don't know, Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur are both speaking with local media tomorrow afternoon. If you're following Packers News, if you're following Jim and I on social media, we will be sharing lots of updates from the press conference. So make sure to check in with us and we'll keep you updated. Jim, I'm looking forward to it too. It'll be interesting. This is the first time Aaron Rodgers has spoken this offseason, at the very least, since the draft and since Jordan Love was taken with the Packers' first pick in the draft. I'm intrigued. We'll find out exactly what he has to say and how he feels about the Packers picking a quarterback in the first round. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I imagine those will be the bulk of the questions he gets. And then along the lines with, how he feels about the organization and Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur and kind of all the stuff we expect. Yeah, and I guess for me though, Olivia, Jordan Love doesn't affect the 2020 team at all. I don't believe Aaron Rodgers is a guy who – I agree with Brian Gutekunst. I don't think Aaron Rodgers thinks anything of Jordan Love right now. He's not better than him, and he's not going to beat him out. So I'm curious to know how this quarterback is handling, not being in the room and not being on the field and these sort of virtual workouts. This is a guy who talks about, building trust and doing all these things with receivers. He hasn't thrown a ball to Devin Funchess yet, right? Josiah DeGuara and hasn't seen him yet. So I'm sort of curious his thoughts on the other stuff, because I just feel, the other thing is we got to do it. I'll write about it. We'll write about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I just I'm kind of, over it without even having done it. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's not as relevant to what's what's to come this season.
Right.
I understand.
I guess if he – and look, Aaron's thoughtful. I don't think he's going to do anything that gives himself any headaches, or say anything, I should say. But look, if he decides to say he's unhappy and feels disrespected or whatever, then like that could affect the 2020 team, and then that changes that perspective, I guess, a little bit. But for me, until I see otherwise or hear otherwise, I am going to believe what the coach and GM say, Olivia, which is they believe he's a pro and isn't really concerned with the backup quarterbacks in his room for 2020.
Well, tomorrow we'll find out. If he feels otherwise, make sure you're tuned in again to everything that we're sharing on social media, PackersNews.com. If there is anything big to share with you, we will be back on here to update all of you. Before we go, I want to remind you, if you enjoyed our conversation about the casualties of the 53-man roster that they will inevitably happen once the season rolls around. Over on PackersNews.com, we do have a roster builder where you can experiment with building the roster yourself. You get to be general manager Brian Gutekunst for a day or multiple days if you decide to do the exercise multiple times, whatever floats your boat. It's a lot of fun. Feel free to tweet us with some of your thoughts, whatever you're thinking about the roster size, and have fun with it. I think it's kind of a fun little tool that we have over on PackersNews.com. So check it out. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate speaking with you all. As always, we will see you next time. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.